Welcome to the Kiwis in London Going Home webinar. We came about this idea for this when following the news stories that New Zealanders were looking for short and long-term reasons to come home to New Zealand. With that, we were polling Kiwis living in the UK about their main concerns, and what became clear to us was the same topics over and over again, which was finding work, getting their finances in order, including pensions, and making sure they didn't lose too much in the exchange fees as well. They were also asking about finding schools, the inevitable pensions situation, the culture shock, as well as settling in back to the long white cloud. As well as that, we also heard questions about mental health and the aspects around relocating their families as well as that. And of course, the inevitable questions about visas, bringing home non-New Zealand partners, and also things like even just getting onto the plane and dealing with MIQ. Long story there. With that in mind, tonight we have a very stacked panel who are going to cover all these and more. We've got from home recruitment, we've got Jamila O'Donnell. She'll be talking about the job market in New Zealand, salaries and comparisons. We've got Geraldine Collette from Halo Financial. She'll be talking about bank accounts and transferring money. Tom Gilbert from Pension Transfers New Zealand. Hello. Talking about transferring pensions to New Zealand. We've also got Bridget Romanis from Mobile Relocation. She'll be talking about settling in, the culture shock, schools, and shipping, and more, I'm sure. We also got Lisa Bell from Reach NZ Immigration. Lisa will be highlighting partner visas and if you're taking a New Zealand partner home as well. Bridget Romanis will be coming back and she'll be talking about mental health and the effects of COVID. She will be replacing Jason from the practical psychologist who unfortunately was not able to be with us tonight. And then finally, we've got Jeremy Matthews from Waka Travel. He's going to be talking about MIQ and flights as well. We'll also be taking some questions at the end, so feel free to submit them as we go. So at that rate, I should introduce myself. I am Clint. I run Kiwis in London, and I'm going to introduce you now to Jamila from Home Recruitment. She'll be kicking off for tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Clint. Appreciate the intro. Kia ora, everyone. My name is Jamila and I am a senior consultant here at Home Recruitment. I returned to New Zealand in 2018 following 2 years living and working in London, and upon returning home to Auckland, started working for Home Recruitment and have been recruiting in the New Zealand market for almost 3 years now. So for tonight, I want to keep brief, but I do want to kind of give you a brief overview of what I'll be covering with about the job market in New Zealand. So we'll talk about the New Zealand job market, we'll talk about high demand roles, market insights from our perspective, and then how to approach the New Zealand job market. So for those who don't know much about Home Recruitment, we are the only recruitment company in New Zealand that specialises in the transitioning of careers of Kiwis returning home, predominantly from the UK or London market. We are the New Zealand office of Australasian Recruitment Company and offer mid-level career opportunities in the areas of sales, marketing, customer success, HR recruitment, projects and business support. We set up Home in 2018 in direct response to the feedback we kept hearing from returners, such as not getting good opportunities, finding it hard to get their experience recognised, and often having to job hop until they found the right opportunity. That's where we come in. Our job is to match people with opportunities and then to educate New Zealand businesses as to why they should be hiring great returning Kiwi talent like yourselves. So, yeah, just talking about the job market. So currently in New Zealand, the unemployment rate is sitting at about 4.0% since June this year, which is actually 0.7% down on the previous quarter. So a really good indication that the market is really booming and most sectors are looking for experienced people versus being industry specific in terms of talent shortages. So that's a really good indication as we were at the moment. In terms of where jobs and opportunities are advertised, typically we're seeing around 28,000 jobs advertised on Seek, with a further 22,000 on Trade Me. Now, there are other job boards in New Zealand, but Seek and Trade Me are the dominant ones. Seek tends to be more professional-based opportunities or roles, where Trade Me tends to be more trade or labour-based. So just keep that in mind when you are scanning the job boards. In terms of overseas returners and leavers, we had just over 300,000 return and more or less the same left from Jan to July in 2021, and the majority of those returning were people who were permanently based overseas and coming back to New Zealand. So I think that's a really good indication that never before has New Zealand had the opportunity of benefiting from returning talent after decades of brain drain, and employers need to make the most of it. The perception of returners coming back into the New Zealand market is generally quite positive in the professional world, particularly with organisations that have more of a global view and see returning talent as exciting prospect hires. Where you may have seen some negative media has probably been in the more blue-collar space, and these have been more isolated incidents that have been reported. Salaries, which is often a big one that we come across, we've seen an average of about 1.3% increase quarter on quarter since last year, and I think due to increased demand for talent across the board, we're seeing an upwards pressure on salaries. So employers are then needing to move fast if they want to secure the talent that they want, and are also needing to be more competitive in their offering. We're seeing candidates at the moment, being presented with multiple opportunities at once, so they need to really think about why they should select or work for their company. You can also have a look at careers.government.New Zealand, which offers a salary guide that could give you a good indication of the sector and role that you're looking for too. This is me kind of going across everything. Next slide, please, Steph. Cool, that's a little bit hard to see, but I've just popped in the kind of 20 most needed jobs in New Zealand at the moment. And actually it's across the board. Here you'll see kind of a diverse range of roles and levels and sectors, which is an indication of we need strong, experienced people to keep our economy booming. But you'll actually see number 4 there, developers and programmers are on this list, and it goes hand to hand with the global growth of the tech sector. Home Recruitment actually partner with one of New Zealand's leading technology recruitment consultancies, and are always interested in talking to anyone with any type of developer programming experience, as opportunities are vast in this space. I think if I had $1 for every time one of my tech clients was seeking a developer or programmer, I'd be a very wealthy lady. So just keep that in mind if you do know anyone. We partner with an IT consultancy too. Next slide, please, Steph. Awesome. So what are we seeing? Well, in terms of the roles that we recruit, so as mentioned, we work across a range of roles in the marketing, sales, customer success, HR recruitment, projects and business support. In 2020, we saw the market being quite saturated with sales and marketing opportunities. And I think that was probably due to the fact employers were needing to, if they weren't already, really focus their attention on the digital aspect of their business, and revenue generating roles. However, now kind of coming into 2021, that's evened out a bit, and we're seeing a broader base of roles to support kind of innovation, growth, and diversification within New Zealand businesses. In terms of industries, as mentioned, technology is booming, but also with most professional services, construction, property companies also looking for talent. The small to medium-sized businesses and FMCG market is also seeing growth, as we're seeing clients hiring new roles in the liquor, food, health, and lifestyle markets too. So it's feeling quite good overall. In terms of salaries and benefits, New Zealand employers, they will move for the right person, but they are still fairly cautious, kind of taking the view of managing their base costs carefully. Often we're seeing kind of agreement being made for salaries to be reviewed at a 3 to 6 month mark versus at your kind of 12-month mark, which is quite standard. So there's a real earn your stripes approach to the New Zealand employment market there as well. And I'll talk a little bit more about that soon. In terms of kind of holidays, if you're not aware, New Zealand have typically four weeks annual leave with 11 bank holidays, and that's compared to a standard of kind of 20 to 25 days annual leave and 8 bank holidays in the UK as a comparison there. Flexible hours and working from home, we're seeing a really big push in this across the board, which is awesome, even from kind of more traditional environments. But usually those kind of flexible hours, working from home policies tend to be more of an unwritten agreement rather than set in stone. So it kind of depends on what the company is doing there. In terms of the benefit package, packages are actually quite average in New Zealand in comparison with the UK, with some offering health and medical insurance and KiwiSaver, typically being 3% employer match contribution. But I think more companies are kind of coming to the party there with added benefits and packages and really thinking about that, particularly with the market being so tight at the moment. There's also, coming back to kind of flexible hours, more of an emphasis on work-life balance, flexible hours, you know, around travel and commuting times, Friday drinks, birthdays off, that type of thing. So keep an eye out for that. And I think it's a really good point to make in asking what a company's doing when you're interviewing as well. Speaking of interviewing, interviews can start off being quite casual here in New Zealand. You'll probably get used to that when you're back here, wherever you are. And they can often start with just a chat over a coffee, then a more formal interview, and then maybe 1 or 2 more to meet the wider team, or a more in-depth interview, depending on where you're sitting kind of level-wise. But typically a 2 or 3 stage interview process when you are in the process for a new opportunity. Employers are still wanting to meet face-to-face, but are slowly feeling more and more comfortable extending offers while candidates are still overseas. We've seen this in the last quarter with a number of candidates returning home, and also in managed isolation. While you're in managed isolation, really good opportunity to get the job search starting, talking to recruiters, setting up interviews. It's a really good use of time. So people are really happy to move things virtually, as we kind of have to be. And time frame for interview processes are typically around 2 to 3 weeks, but some employers are starting to catch on that they need to move quickly to secure the talent they want. But rough time frames for you. Temp, contract or permanent, I think our advice is to consider temp or contract roles for perhaps the first few months you're back in New Zealand, to help get you familiarised with the market and to avoid diving into the wrong role/company. I think sometimes there's a perception that there's nothing going on in New Zealand and there's no job opportunities or anything. That's not the case. And there is the temptation to just take a job and just start earning. I know, but when this happens, there is often a realignment of priorities. You know, after 6 months, when things on the home, friends and family front had settled and the job search starts again. So I would say, you know, take the time to come back home, settle in, catch up with everyone. I know we'll be talking about kind of that settling in or culture shock period later tonight, but I think that's really important with the job search as well. Cool. And kind of my last point around approaching the market. So next slide, please, Steph, is where do you even start? I think particularly with New Zealand, networking is key. You know, everyone knows everyone, and that you'll quickly kind of be reminded of that when you return back. So I think, yeah, attending and networking for your industry sector is great. So connect with old colleagues, family members, or join local networks to learn more about who is who and what opportunities exist with your experience. You can jump on the job boards, Seek Trade Me, like I spoke about earlier, and they offer insights into the current needs of the market, but often employers often overlook or don't know how to translate overseas experience. So perhaps your job title most recently in the UK may not match what a New Zealand employer is looking for, and they just may not get it. So I would use the job boards as a research tool. You can play with salary bands to kind of get you started. Applying direct is also a really great way to get started. So check out the company and website, apply directly. This is often a good approach for banking and professional services firms who often have a large in-house talent acquisition teams. So kind of maybe see who's hiring, and maybe connect with them on LinkedIn or approach directly. Resources can be limited with number of vacancies high, so just be sure you're applying for roles that you are qualified in, being really targeted in those introductions versus just scattergunning your CV. Or, of course, reach out to home recruitment. So myself and the team, we've all made the transition home and can help tailor your CV, manage salary expectations, really learn about your key motivators, discuss roles, companies and industries that we can perhaps make proactive introductions to, and just be a key support person in your job search. It's one of the biggest, decisions, all things in people's lives is your job, and we really want to help make that a seamless transition for you. So we've got relationships with hiring managers of some of New Zealand's most interesting and fastest growing companies who want to hear about overseas talent and trust us to connect the dots. So we'd really love to support you or anyone in your network in the job search coming back home. So please do check out our website, LinkedIn, all the usual channels, and I hope to connect with some of you soon. Thanks, Clint.
Thank you very much, Jamila. And just so you know, if anybody has any questions at all, you can always submit questions anytime. And now we've got Geraldine Collette from Halo Financial. Sorry, there you go.
Thanks, Clint. Kia ora, everyone. Hello, fellow Kiwis. It's great, really great to be speaking to a virtual room full of Kiwis. So, quite an honour, actually. Yeah, finances, one of those kind of icky things that you don't really want to think about, but you've got to. So hopefully I can offer some tips tonight that will help you start to think about your finances, because they're not something you should leave till the last minute. And hopefully I can help you save some dosh or help you get more New Zealand dollars for your sterling at the end of it. First slide, Steph. Okay, so sorting your bank accounts. I guess some questions you need to look at in terms of your finances before you start to head home is, have you still got your bank account open in New Zealand? A lot of you, if you've been away for a long time, you might have closed your bank account in New Zealand. But no worries if you have, because it is very easy to open your bank account again anyway in New Zealand, and you can do it from the UK before you leave. So I would really recommend that you do, if your bank account's not still open, do get your bank account open in New Zealand. You can do it up to 12 months before you leave with most of the major banks. So just get that done. And that's sort of one of those things you can tick off your list as well. If you are obviously going home in the next 12 months, they do have dedicated teams that will help you with your banking and all sorts of other bits and pieces. So it is a good idea to get the bank accounts open as soon as you can. And I suspect most of you are probably thinking or trying at least to get home in the next 12 months. We do quite often get asked about UK bank accounts. Should I leave my bank account open in the UK? I would say yes, yes, yes. We all know how hard it was to open a bank account in the UK when we arrived here. So I would really recommend leave it open if you can, even once you leave it open for a bit. You may have, some people leave property back here or ISAs or other financial interests. So it's definitely a good idea to leave your bank account open here in the UK, at least for the interim period anyway. And also the thing is, you just never know when you might have to come back for whatever reason. So as I said, leave your bank account open in the UK if you can, as long as you can. Hey, I'm actually from Halo Financial, and I'll tell you a little bit about what we do, but we do work closely with most of the major banks in New Zealand. So if you do want to get your bank accounts open in New Zealand, just reach out to me, let me know, and I can provide you with direct contact details for the banks, so we can get that done for you. So next slide, Steph, please. Okay, so Halo Financial, talked about bank accounts already. So that's, as I said, one thing to tick off your list. But Halo Financial, what do we do, and how can we help you with your finances? So we are foreign exchange. We are a very customer-focused foreign exchange specialist. So we act as an alternative to using your bank to do your transfers home. So some of you may have already sent money home, and a lot of you do it through various platforms. And probably some of you still do it through your UK bank. And you do a transfer home. So we do that for you, but we do much better exchange rates. So they're actually, you'll end up with hopefully more money in your New Zealand bank account at the other end. We also don't charge fees. So that's another thing to look out for when you're transferring your money home. Just watch out for those fees. Halo don't charge fees. So that's something to just be mindful of. We also, we do have an online platform, so you can do it online if you want, but where we're kind of slightly different is we are people. And if you want to talk to someone about transferring your money home, if you're a bit concerned about it, you will have your own dedicated, experienced and trained currency consultants who will actually talk to you about what's been happening with the exchange rates, whether it's recently or in the last year, the last 6 months. They'll go through with you what has been happening with sterling against New Zealand dollars. And I'll show you shortly a chart where you can see the huge difference it can make by just getting the timing right, because there's nothing more annoying. And, you know, we've all done it at some point where you transfer money home and the next day it's even better rate, and you kind of kick yourself. So getting some guidance from an expert that can really help you with timing is really, really important and can make a difference. The other thing we can help you with is really a range of different solutions around transferring your money home. It's not just about, here's the rate, you decide whether you want to take it or not. There are other ways to really get some good rates. If the rates are really in your favour and you haven't got the money available to transfer yet, we can lock that rate in for you, and we can lock it in for up to 2 years. We can put some alerts on. So if you want to put an alert on, say, for 2, I mean, that seems to be a huge threshold at the moment that we're all waiting for again. We can put an alert on for you, and we can either do an automatic buy, or we can alert you to when the rate's in your favour. So there's all sorts of different solutions we can provide as well. And I guess most importantly, especially at the moment when there's so many scams and hacking of accounts, etc., we're fast, we're safe and secure, and we're FCA authorised, so we are regulated as well. And as I said, we're people. So if you've got any problems or you want to talk to someone, you can just pick up the phone and give us a call, or even myself, drop me an email or give me a call as well. Next slide, Steph. Okay, so just a little bit of sort of background about exchange rates. You know, some of you will probably know this already, but you know, there are a lot of influences in the world that make exchange rates move up or down in your favour or against your favour. And I just thought I'd highlight some things that really do make some differences. And just so you're aware as well, the exchange rates, they move every second of the day. So when you have someone that says, you know, we can give you this rate today, within 10 seconds, that rate could have moved either further in your favour or against your favour. So you need to be keeping an eye on exchange rates every second of the day to get true exchange rates. And again, that's something we can do for you and save you the hassle. But things like Brexit, that had a huge impact on exchange rates all the way around the world against sterling. Trade wars, China, commodities, central banks, and obviously at the moment the big one is COVID, having a huge effect on influences on exchange rates. We know that when New Zealand goes into its lockdown like it has done, we know that weakens the dollar. When something happens in the UK, something in terms of Brexit or whatever the situation is, it does cause movement. So keep an eye on what's happening in the world as well, because that will affect your exchange rates. Next slide, Steph. I won't go into this in too much detail, but I just wanted to kind of point out sort of what I said in my last slide about there being a range of solutions. It's not just about a spot rate. We can really help you get the best possible rates within the time frame that you have. So just something to bear in mind, and worth having a chat to one of our currency specialists about. You don't have to use us, but it's really good to get some insights and see what the options are available. Next slide, Steph. And this is really probably the most important slide that I have, just showing you the difference that exchange rates can make, and what that means for you guys. And look, if you're lucky enough to have 100K to send home, this is the sort of difference it can make. Just going right back to January of this year, we hit a very much a low, and if you'd had 100,000 sterling to send home, you would have got $186,000. Yet over the last couple of days, there's been a little bit of movement, but it's been probably around static at around 194. So if you'd had your 100K and sent that home over the last day or so, you would have got 94,000. So you can see it's quite a difference. There's a difference of $8,000. You know, that could buy you a car. When you get home, it can buy a lot of money. And as if you look right back to October last year, it was, you know, up at 197. And some of you that have been watching the rates will know that back in August, at the late August of this year, we did hit 2 a couple of times in the month. And a threshold that a lot of Kiwis going home have been waiting for. So we had a lot of what we call orders in, and that did trigger a lot of people buying their currency, buying their New Zealand dollars with their sterling. So we had quite a few happy Kiwis getting $2 to the pound. But you know, when I came over a long time ago, it was $3.60 to the pound, and sadly those days I think are very much gone. So two's good. Yeah, so keep an eye on it is sort of something I would say. Next slide, Steph. So I guess what I just wanted to kind of give you a couple of my top tips to kind of keep an eye out for when you're thinking about your finances, no matter how long, you know, it is before you go home. Keep an eye on the exchange rates, or let someone like Halo do it for you. We can send out daily, monthly, weekly exchange rate updates for Kiwi dollar to sterling. So you can register with us. You don't have to use us, but just register with us to get the information and sort of stay educated. Don't leave it till the last minute. I know a lot of you are probably quite a few months off leaving, but don't leave exchanging your money to the last minute, because then you'll have to take the rate it is on the day. And, you know, as I've sort of pointed out, it's all about timing. So if it is in your favor over the next couple of months before you go, take advantage of it and get it done. But yeah, just don't leave it till the last minute. It's all about planning well in advance. And as I mentioned earlier, anyone that wants to get their bank accounts open, please reach out and let me know, and we can give you some direct contacts and get that sorted for you. But that's all from me. So thank you. Wishing you all a lovely evening, and yeah, good luck with the move home.
Yes, Geraldine, thanks so much for that. We've now got Tom Gilbert from Pension Transfers New Zealand ready to talk.
Well, good evening all. Thank you for all your time. Pension transfers, yeah, really exciting topic, but I'll just give you some tips, and yeah, hopefully we can be of some assistance to you guys. So next slide, Steph. Yeah, so I'll just go through quickly like who we are, what we do, what our process is, why transfer your pensions to New Zealand, give you a comparison of services to others, the Halo super deal, and our contact details. Next slide, Steph. So we've been specialising in transferring pensions since 2000. We're one of the largest pension transfer companies in New Zealand. We're independently owned. We have regulated offices both in the UK and New Zealand. I'm a member of the Financial Advice New Zealand. I'm a financial advisor, and we're a standalone specialist transfer company. So we work on behalf of some other companies to help their clients transfer pensions across to New Zealand. Next slide, please. So with regulated offices, both in UK and NZ, we try to give our clients the best experience possible. We provide personal financial advice, so it's just not general. We get down to your personal details and work out the pros and cons of the actual transfer, if it's in your best interest or not. We do one-to-one investment risk profiling, and we use ROPS, retirement planning advice. And a ROPS is like a recognised overseas pension scheme. And what we don't do is mortgages, risk insurance, and fire in general. We just purely focus on pension transfers. Next slide, please. Our process is, it's 3 easy steps. Basically, we get you to register your details on our website. Once you've done that, you'll receive a letter of authority. We get you to sign that, which just allows us to contact your pension provider on your behalf. We find out what we need to know. We work out the advantages of doing the transfer, the disadvantages, and then put forward a recommendation to yourself. We don't. The main thing is just to get the pension across to New Zealand before the UK keep changing rules, which is a regular thing. We have sterling accounts within the pension scheme, so we don't really need to worry about the exchange rate. We just want to secure the transfer. Once the money's here in New Zealand, as Geraldine was saying, we can put in an order and get that order on the board. So when that rate's struck, you get your preferred rate. And we have the ability to dollar cost average funds from Great British pounds to New Zealand dollars over a period of time. Next slide, please. Why transfer pensions to New Zealand? Well, the funds come across to New Zealand with UK tax relief, and that's one of the main reasons why people do these transfers. So you're saving roughly up to 30%. You've never paid tax on these funds, so it's just a huge benefit. When you reach the age of 55, you've got benefit. You can start taking benefits. First one is from 25% tax-free. That can be used for pretty much anything. And then from age 55, you can start drawing income from that fund, also tax-free. In the event of death, the full fund goes to your family estate as opposed to half going back to the UK coffers. You've got control over the investments. The fund providers that we use have apps on your phone, so everything's transparent. Everything's at your fingertips. You've got full control over the funds. You've got retirement benefits, and you don't have to worry about exchange rates once you've converted the funds to New Zealand dollars. Next slide, please. Now, with the funds that we use, we've got a whole range of ROPS providers. So you've got a whole options of diversified portfolios. You can keep it simple, just put it into a balanced fund or a growth fund, or you can get specific. So we provide the one-to-one advice around that, do the risk profiling. We've got, as I said before, we've got sterling international portfolios. So once the funds are here in New Zealand, the funds can still remain in sterling for as long as you like until you need to take benefits. We will send you out the monthly returns, so you've got a full understanding of what's happening to your investments. You've got online access. We do annual reviews. Everything's transparent, and we can guarantee that we won't get beaten on fees. Next slide, please. We've got the Halo Super Deal. So if you decide to use our services, if you mention the word Halo in our comments box, we're willing to send you a $500 travel voucher on completion. The transfers must be completed before the end of 2000. There's a typo there. It's supposed to be 2022. Understand you're not coming here overnight. And we can only start working on your transfer once you have arrived in New Zealand. But in saying that, please register your details on our website so you're in our database. We can keep you informed with what's happening. And then likewise, you just give us a heads up when you're looking to come to New Zealand within about a month or so. And then we can send you out an information pack so you can start getting your pension prepared to be transferred to New Zealand. Next slide, please. So these are my contact details. Feel free to send me an email, have a look at our website, and if you have any questions at all, drop me a line and I'm more than happy to come back to you. I'll hand you back to Clint. Thank you.
Cheers, Tom. Thanks very much for that. Right now we have Bridget from Mobile Relocation, who's now going to talk to us about lots of things.
Yes, lots of things involved in moving back to New Zealand, Clint, I think would be the summary of that. Kia ora, everybody. Thank you for inviting me along this evening to talk to you about starting your new life in New Zealand and having a successful homecoming. I've been a bit of a serial expat myself. I have lived overseas for most of my working life and repatriated back to New Zealand twice and run Mobile Relocation. We have 17 advisors throughout New Zealand. And we make resettlement plans for people, starting from everything like shipping and then running through to the whole process of settling in New Zealand, finding housing, schooling, and getting yourself all organised. Steph, could we just go back to the previous slide for 1 minute? Quickly, just going to run through what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about settling in and some of the specific issues that you've raised with Clint that you want some advice on. Then we're going to move, which is housing, schooling and shipping. And then we're going to move on to culture shock and adjustment. Okay, Steph, can we go back to the other slide now? So I don't have to look at myself again. Typically, the people we work with have been away for more than 10 years. They've got kids and possibly a spouse born outside, sorry, a spouse who's not a New Zealander and children who've been born outside New Zealand. They've holidayed here a lot, but they left New Zealand quite a long time ago as a single or a couple. But they're really motivated to get back to New Zealand and create a new life. And they want to be focusing on the future rather than all the stress and complication of relocation in the middle of a pandemic. Typically, we put together a Move to New Zealand plan for them and get them through that process successfully. So just moving through the areas that Clint discovered from you, I mean, they match pretty much what our client base is interested in too. I'm going to start off with schooling and housing because they sort of fall into a similar category really. And I think particularly as a result of the pandemic, the urge to get a home, get kids settled into school, have some stability, seeing New Zealand as the answer to the turmoil that you've all been through in the UK over the last 18 months to 2 years is a really natural thing. But it's quite important to step back from the emotion and really evaluate the pros and cons of what you're going to do about housing and schooling. Everything you've heard about the New Zealand housing market is true. Yes, it is expensive and both renting and purchasing property is increasing in price all the time. Yes, it is very competitive. It's very difficult to rent a property from offshore. It's quite possible to buy a property from offshore, but again, that's one of the areas where I think you really need to think very carefully before you do that. If it's some time since you've lived in New Zealand, although you've been on holiday, you're not necessarily going to know what the neighbourhoods that are going to suit you are going to be like in New Zealand. It's quite different in terms of requirements, what you'll need if you're a single person, which is maybe what you were before you left, as opposed to when you come back with having to integrate school zones into decision making and figuring out what's going to be the right place for your family to live in terms of lifestyle. So though it may be possible to commit to purchasing a property before you come to New Zealand, I think it's important to step back and think about it rationally first before you take that big move. And I would liken it really to what Jamila mentioned earlier about not taking on a permanent role. You know, get yourself back here, get settled, and then take on some big decisions. With schooling, there's certainly a lot of preparation that can be done in advance. And for those of you who have older children, it's often a really important part of their commitment or you encouraging them to commit to coming back to New Zealand to have some understanding of where they're going to be going to school. They'll be leaving behind all their networks and everything they know in the UK. So certainly do your research, look at different qualifications and how they mesh. Of course, New Zealand has our unique NCEA system, which is quite different to anywhere else in the world, but there are schools that offer Cambridge and IB as well. So do some research, but don't commit until you get back to New Zealand. And what we say to all our clients, whether they're returning Kiwis or expats who've never been to New Zealand before, as parents, you'll go into a school, you'll talk to the principal, you'll see how the staff relate to the children, the way the children behave, and you'll have almost a feeling about what is going to be the right place for your family and your children, as well as taking into account all the key points around qualifications and where you're living. And of course, school zone. You can't choose a school without a house, and you can't choose a house without knowing what the schools are like in an area, and whether that's going to be the right fit for your children. So some complex decisions, which in our experience are actually best made finally on the ground in New Zealand, but certainly do your research before you get here. The third sort of practical point, which I know a lot of you raised with Clint, was shipping. Now, shipping, all I can say is lower your expectations. That's a kind way of explaining what's happening in the shipping world at the moment. Due to COVID, there's a worldwide shortage of containers and all the shipping routes are disrupted. It's a lot more expensive than it was, and everything takes much longer to get to New Zealand. So a lot of our time is spent working with our clients, figuring out exactly what they need to take, optimizing what they want to bring against the cost of it, figuring out what things are going to cost in New Zealand. So there's quite a piece of work to be done around shipping prior to departure. Can we move on to the next slide now, please, Steve? Now, what I'm going to talk about is the whole resettlement piece. Now, this is a slide or a diagram which is backed up by a lot of research. It's in a cross-cultural researcher called Hofstede developed it originally for expats. And I know from my personal experience, it's entirely relevant for returning Kiwis too. Don't think because you're going home, you're not going to go through some of this, because you will. And I'm going to talk about reverse culture shock in more detail in a minute. The phases of relocation, it's difficult to put a time frame on it, but everybody pretty much goes through these different phases. When you first get back, there's a euphoria honeymoon period, always wanted to come back to New Zealand, loving it, so much better here. And then over time, you slip down into culture shock and disillusionment. And this is normal. Most people have it. You will be very, very lucky if you manage to avoid it. But that is where there's that sudden realization, OMG, what have I done? The driving's terrible. I can't get what I want in the shops. There's no Amazon Prime. Everything that seemed good about your life offshore is no longer available in New Zealand. You think, why did I do this? Rest assured, you will come out of this through a process of acculturation, which is where you learn to appreciate the good things about being in New Zealand. You make peace with what you've left behind, and you reach a point of stability where you're happy with where you are in your life. Now, the trick there is that you can see there's 3 different levels of stability. The bottom one is a sort of unhappy returned expat. The middle one is a person who's going, yeah, that's okay. I realize, some things are good, some things are bad. And then the top level is a person who's really, pretty happy with their life in New Zealand. They've got a great job, their kids are settled, everything's going well. So, everybody will go through this phase, and I guess it's up to individuals and sometimes the circumstances as to how well you sit in that stability period when you do get there. Now, I want to talk particularly about reverse culture shock, because the culture shock disillusionment for a returning Kiwi is a little bit different to an expat who's moving to New Zealand. You will go through this phase of adjustment and possibly emotional difficulties as you return to a place that you kind of think of as home, and home is the place you go back to. You always feel safe, it's normal, it's where things are wonderful, but maybe not. It's probably not going to be quite as easy as you think, and maybe not quite as easy as your family and friends think it's going to be for you too. You've been changed by living overseas. I know that myself. I came back with 2 children who were born overseas. I'd lived in India and Singapore, which are quite different cultures to New Zealand. I've absorbed many things about those cultures and had many experiences which are quite different to my peers in New Zealand. So that's made me into a different person. New Zealand has also changed while you've been away too. And then the other thing that's happened is your life circumstances have almost inevitably changed. You may now have a partner who's not a New Zealander. You may have children who were born overseas. So you probably left New Zealand as maybe you were living in a shared flat. You had a backpack. You went off to London. Quite a few years later, you come back and your life now doesn't look anything like that person who lived in the shared flat and left with a backpack. You're concerned about school zones and mortgages and neighbourhoods, all of those things that never entered your horizon before you left this place that you're now going back to that's somehow called home. And it can be unexpected too. When you go overseas, you expect there's going to be cultural differences. You know, you might be going to a place with a different language, and you just expect that you're going to have to adjust. Coming back to New Zealand, you need to bring that same mindset with you. You're going to need to adjust to New Zealand. You're not just going to slip back in as easily as it might seem you could. Often people say to us, oh, look, I've been on holiday in New Zealand, you know, every year for the last 15 years. I know all about New Zealand. And I think one of our clients actually summed this up most accurately to me. She said, we transferred our micro life, which was all about, you know, staying at batches and tripping around over every summer, these golden weather times. We had to transfer that into a real life in New Zealand, which had things like jobs, and schools and commuting. And it was a lot more complex. And you know, the fun parts of it were mixed with everyday life, I guess is the best way of putting it. So expect that to happen. Now, what are the main effects of culture shock? How do people experience it? Self-esteem, really interestingly, self-esteem is one of the main things that's threatened when you come back to your home country, which can sound a bit counterintuitive. But if you think about where you are now in the UK, you know, you're well established in your career, people know you. You've got bank accounts, you've got everything set up around you. You come back to New Zealand professionally, you may have to start again in terms of your networking. Your offshore experience, as Jamila mentioned, may need to be translated into New Zealand language to be accepted. You know, things like it might be difficult to re-establish your credit rating, and it tells on your self-esteem when you're always having to prove yourself and almost start again. So that can be quite exhausting and tiring for people. There's also a feeling of not belonging. As I mentioned before, you've changed, your family and friends are probably expecting you to slot straight back in, and you don't, because you're a different person to the one who left. And this can be particularly difficult for family members who are not Kiwis, either a spouse who's not a Kiwi or children who have been through an education system and have grown up overseas. They'll come back and they might be a bit different to their cousins. They've had a different set of experiences and they have to fit into a New Zealand schooling environment. So that feeling of being different and not belonging can be profound throughout the family for quite different reasons. And I think all of this is exacerbated by the pandemic. I'm going to talk about this a bit further on when I come into the mental health aspects of relocation, but everybody's been under so much pressure and stress over the last 2 years. Relocation is inherently stressful at the best of times. It rates up there, I think, with serious illness on the RABE stress scale. And then you add the pandemic on top of that, and the expectation that coming home is going to solve all your problems. It sort of sets you up for culture shock in a way, because there are going to be hiccups along the way. So advice, what can I suggest? I think the most important thing is to expect culture shock. And what I've tried to do today very quickly is give you a little bit of understanding of it. And there is a much longer article on culture shock that's in our on our website. Understand it and know what to expect. Secondly, ask for help. Get yourself set up logistically in New Zealand as quickly as you can and get your life started, and that will put you on a path to normality. Finally, I am going to show you, it's got to show up there against the mountains. Anyway, not too bad. We have a Move to New Zealand checklist, which you can download from our website. The website is up there on the screen. Thank you, Steph. And that has a really comprehensive list of things you need to consider when you're moving back to New Zealand from logistical point of view, practical and emotional. So download that, it's free, and that will get you going on the planning, which I think is essential for anybody wanting to move back to New Zealand. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, we also publish quite often on LinkedIn on all sorts of topics related to moving back to New Zealand. So thank you, and back to you, Clint.
No worries. Thank you so much, Bridget. Just to remind people, if you are watching, I can see there's many of you there, to make sure you do submit your questions. We can answer your questions later on today. Without further ado, we've got Lisa Bell from Reach NZ Immigration, and she's ready now to talk to you all about immigration.
Thank you, Clint. My name is Lisa Bell and I am a licensed immigration advisor, and I'm based in Sumner, which is a little beach town in Christchurch, New Zealand. So my segment is really aimed at those New Zealanders who are returning home with foreign partners. And that also does include Australian citizens who are partners. Unfortunately, you cannot enter New Zealand at the moment. You do need to request permission to enter because, as you know, our borders are closed. And they have been closed since March 2020 due to COVID. Thankfully, there are exemptions to the border closures, so partners of New Zealanders are included in the exemptions. But immigration policy is complex, and when lodging a partnership visa, you must meet partnership policy and you must supply evidence. Everybody's situation is unique, and you need to be aware that health conditions and previous run-ins with the authorities can have a negative impact on your ability to migrate to New Zealand, even if you have clean slated convictions. So it's really important to take your individual situation into account. And a common mistake, or several common mistakes that I see people making at the moment, is they're applying for the wrong type of visa. They don't understand the policy correctly, and they're not supplying the evidence that Immigration New Zealand want to see for their visa. So at the moment, I think a lot of people are really hung up on getting a critical purpose visitor visa for their partner. It's a 6-month visitor visa. They arrive in the country, and right away, if they want to work, they have to lodge a second visa, which is a work visa. It's not the best visa for their needs. There are other options. So there are visitor visas, work visas, resident visas. And if you have lived with your partner for more than 5 years offshore, you may be eligible to go straight to permanent residence, which is really beneficial. To be able to get to PR is a positive thing. A hot tip is that the processing times listed on Immigration New Zealand's website aren't really accurate. I think for residents, they say it takes 11 months. And most of my residence applications have been getting processed in about 3 months. So just bear that in mind. It is good to talk to a professional to understand what is actually happening in that area. The benefits of using an advisor like myself is that everybody's situation is unique. I interview you, I identify the risks with your application, and I prepare you early on. So we have what we need to get a positive result. And if yours is a high risk application, you understand from the get-go that you're lodging an application that has a high risk of decline. Even if you have an uncomplicated application, there is a lot of documentation involved and it is stressful. So I guide you through the process. I prepare your application for you. I speak with the case officers on your behalf. So I represent you to Immigration New Zealand. And my aim is to lodge every application with everything required for a quick decision. If it's not going to be a quick decision, I do let you know that it's potentially going to be delayed due to complications. Commonly, people attempt to lodge applications that don't have enough evidence. They're not meeting the policy requirements, and that causes significant delays in the processing of their visa. So it is really important to engage a professional to help you through this process, and all your documents and all your interactions with Immigration New Zealand are going to be on file forever. So it's really important to get it correct the first time around. Engaging an advisor is you taking a positive step to control the things that you can control, to reduce the stress when you're immigrating. So if you do want to get in touch and ask me any questions, please send me an email. My chat is only brief today, so I am finished, but I hope that was helpful. And I'll pass it back to Clint.
Hello, thank you so much, Lisa. That's fantastic. We're now coming back to Bridget. She is replacing Jason from Practical Psychologist, who unfortunately wasn't able to be with us today. We hope he's going to be well. Anyway, Bridget is going to cover mental health and COVID. You.
Ngā mihi. Thank you, Clint. Yes, I'm back again. Now, the reason I offered to help out here today really is because we at Mobile Relocation realise that mental health and wellbeing is such a crucial part of relocation. You want to be happy in the place that you've turned your life around to get to. So we have actually developed over the last 3 years an award-winning mental health and wellbeing program in conjunction with Dr. Sonia Jaeger, who's an international mental health specialist. She's actually a global nomad herself. And provides online therapy and counselling for expats located all over the world. So she lives and breathes what expats are going through moving around countries. So I'd like to acknowledge Most of the expertise in what I'm going to say today is drawn from Sonia, not me. So I've just pulled out a few key points from our wellbeing program to share with you today. The key takeaway, just put in the point at the top of the slide there, is to focus on what you can control rather than what you can't. So can we just pop on to the next slide, Steph? Thanks. Right, I just want to start off with this really basic primer. A number of you will have heard of this already, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and just talk about the COVID effect in relation to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now, the theory behind this is that in order to be at your best self, really enjoying life, there's a pyramid of things that you need to get through. And if you don't have one layer of the pyramid, then it's hard to get to the next layer of the pyramid. So right at the bottom of the pyramid there is physiological needs. And there's a whole lot of stuff there, but basically food, shelter, clothing, sleep. And if you look at us during the pandemic, most of us have had some, if not all of that, threatened in some way. So our basic physiological needs are under threat, and it's taking a lot of our energy and time to deal with those, whether you're an expat or whether you're living in your home country. The basic foundation of your well-being has been under threat for up to 2 years. Secondly, safety needs. I mean, and that just goes hand in hand with COVID. People are worried about their safety, their health, whether they're going to survive, and they're worried about their family members. People are feeling unsafe. So that's the bottom two parts of the pyramid which are under threat. Love and belonging. And I know that, I feel so much for the Kiwis who are offshore and separated from their family and friends, keen to get back to New Zealand, keen for family to come, but we don't know when that's going to happen. So that's the third tier of the hierarchy of needs that has been under threat. Esteem and self-actualization are sort of the icing on the cake. So, if you look at there's 5 levels to the pyramid, and 3 levels of the pyramid have been challenged during the last 2 years. So the COVID effect is really has caused fundamental shifts in people's well-being. Even if you just look at this very simple pyramid, it's clear that whether you're an expat or not, it's been a tough time, and mental health has suffered as a result. Could you just move to the next slide, please, Steph? So what I want to talk about now is what has happened specifically for expats that's different to the general population. The Maslow summary applies to everybody. So I'm going to start off with negatives, and then I'm going to give you a few positives as well about that. There's been even more uncertainty in these uncertain times. For you as Kiwis in the UK, some of you will have had concerns about visas. Some of you may have lost jobs. The ability to repatriate is difficult, very difficult at the moment with the MIQ situation and previously with flights and lockdowns. So the uncertainty factor has certainly ramped up in your lives, and that is greater than it is for British people staying in the UK. Secondly, that separation from loved ones and not knowing if or when you're going to be able to see them again. That's stronger for expats. If you're a British person and you're used to seeing your family locally, you can see them again now, but you Kiwis, you can't physically see your family at the moment because of the difficulty of getting back to New Zealand. For expats, the social dislocation caused by lockdown and working from home can be much worse, particularly if your social networks in the UK are not particularly well developed. Maybe you had only recently arrived when COVID hit. You hadn't had a chance to make many local friends, so you didn't have people you could bring up and say, gosh, how do I get hold of this or that, or just that kind of local knowledge. You may not have had access to that. And also local support. It's all very well having Zoom support from family in New Zealand, but they don't really know what you're going through in the same way that people in the UK will. So that has made, I think, the lockdown and work from home situation more difficult for expats than it is for locals. And the result of this, and there's starting to be some research coming out now, is that expats are showing greater mental health challenges, anxiety, depression, relationship, family conflict, trauma, reactions, and also grief and loss, grief over the life that they have lost as expats living in the UK, and sometimes also grief over physical loss of friends and people that due to the COVID pandemic itself. So that's why things have been a little bit tougher for expats. Now, there is a little bit of a silver lining here. There's some research showing that expats are better prepared for COVID. And if you think about that, it sort of makes a bit of sense. As an expat, you've made the decision to go to the UK. You're open to a bit of adventure. In a way, the lockdowns, there's sort of a joking term around that it's COVID land. It's like going to a new place. Suddenly the rules of life are different. The culture of living in COVID land is different to the culture of the UK. People wear masks in COVID land. The supermarkets are different. They have queues. They didn't have those in the UK prior to COVID. So all of the characteristics that you drew on as an expat when you first came to the UK, being used to uncertainty and transitions and change, in fact, seeking it out, being resilient and flexible and willing to adapt, and having coping strategies for dealing or interacting with your nearest and dearest online. Those things are all characteristics and experiences that will have served you well, even though you might not feel it has. If you think of a Brit who is used to seeing their family for lunch maybe once a week, or catching up with them on a regular basis in person, they're in quite a different situation when you go into lockdown compared to you, where you've had to talk to your family on Zoom, prior to COVID for all the years you've been in the UK. So switching to that level of less physical engagement, may not be such of an issue for you. So, take strength in being an expat and how that may have helped your mental health through this period. But of course, accepting that there are those extra risks to you too. So what is the best piece of advice that I can provide to you based on our wellbeing program and the experience we've had with the expats? Focus on what you can control rather than what you can't control. What you can't control is the pandemic, how long it's going to last, what other people are doing, predicting what will happen. Can't control the amount of toilet paper in the store. Not so much of an issue in the UK for you now, but every time we have a lockdown in New Zealand, the whole toilet paper thing starts again. You can't control the laws and regulations like MIQ, sadly. I know that's a huge source of stress, but the reality is that's mandated by the government in New Zealand. You can't travel, you can't control when you're going to be able to travel or move, or when you're going to be able to see your loved ones to a certain degree. So if you can try and sort of park that side, and what we actually advise to people is write down a big list of all the things you're worried about and then divide them into two lists. One of the things that you have some control over, and one of the and a second list of the things that you don't have control over. So these are the things you can control. Make sure you're on top of all the travel risks with getting to New Zealand. So make sure you use a travel agent. Jeremy's going to talk about that. I couldn't recommend that more highly. Make sure you understand pre-departure testing and understand exactly how the MIQ booking system works. Prepare and plan for your return home. Don't wing it. And I think a number of the speakers have mentioned that already. Make sure you're looking after yourself. Don't just focus on getting home as your primary objective in life and neglect your own well-being. Make sure you're eating well, getting some sleep, spending time with people you love. Make sure you get authoritative information. That's why I'm so thrilled that you've all come to this call today. Do not rely on social media and other people's experiences. Go to people who know what they're talking about so they give you the right answers and you're not led off on wild goose chases, causing yourself more stress. Make time for your children and family. They are often the reason for you coming back to New Zealand. Don't just get caught up in all the logistics of moving home. Take time to have fun and enjoyment with them. Take your kids, get them to do a video around your house in the UK before you leave. Get them to video their friends if they're back at school. Make up a little, scenario or a little tape of your life in New Zealand so you've got something to reflect on, and it's been a fun project you've done together. Keep up your online connections with family and friends in New Zealand. Even though it's not perfect, it's what you've got at the moment. You will at some stage get to see them again, but don't let that go just because you can't get back to see them now. So again, our moving checklist that I mentioned before, download that from our website. It has more information on the emotional impacts of relocation. And as Mental Health Awareness Week is coming up in New Zealand next week, we've recorded an interview with our mental health guru, Dr. Sonia Jaeger, which is on our website in the Move to New Zealand resources section. So jump in there, and that video is about 20 minutes long on YouTube, well worth a watch just to understand a bit more about mental health for expats. So thank you, Clint. I will move back to you now.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. it. Right now, we've got Jeremy from Motivate Travel. He's going to be talking to you guys all about MIQ and flights. Take it away, mate.
Kia ora whānau. Thanks, Clint, and thanks everyone for tuning in and hearing a little bit of wisdom from people who maybe know a little bit about what they're talking about. I'm Jeremy Matthews from World Travellers in Motueka, a little village in New Zealand who a lot of you won't have been to. I've been 30 years in this business, so I like to think I know a bit of how this whole thing works. 15 of those years I was a travel agent at a university, so was very used to bringing particularly postgraduate students from all corners of the globe to the university and making sure all the boxes were ticked so that they didn't get to the airport and there were tears. So well used to that process, been doing it for years. In fact, one of my favourite activities is de-stressing people. 10 years ago, our family lived in Christchurch when the big quake happened, and our house wasn't too badly damaged. So my son and I strapped our shovels to our bikes, took off across the city and helped out with the Student Volunteer Army and others, taking the liquefaction silt out of everyone's sections, and it was fantastic to be able to de-stress some of those property owners. You know, they just so appreciated a helping hand at that time. We went home, planted some tomatoes, and went back once those tomatoes were a bit higher to some of those places, and just talked with the people, and yeah, it felt really good. So I'm used to being in that space. How my COVID travel journey started was way back in late February last year, when I had several offshore, Europeans, Brits, came flying into my office. This COVID thing was starting to really take off, and a lot of their tickets were useless. They just couldn't use them. The flights were being cancelled. They couldn't transit in certain places. So I was, pretty quickly went up the learning curve and just worked out how to get these people home without them, getting to the airport, and things were turning to custard. So I started doing that pretty early, and I sent truckloads of people back, mostly through the US, to get home, and it was great. Got messages back from them once they got home, and everything had gone really well. So I was encouraged by that. Then I started to hear about Kiwis stuck overseas. Because I'd been on an OE myself after I'd finished studying, I could empathise with everyone overseas, really stressed. Should I come home? Should I stay? Am I going to get home? I've booked flights, but they've cancelled, and all that kind of stuff. So I used what I'd learned in the previous month, and I went searching, and I found Kiwis in London, started helping people out on that site, and got some, had some good results. So thank you for the support from your Kiwis in London members. It's been really great. The advantage of using a travel agent versus DIY during COVID. Yes, you've probably all heard of or know people that have done that, and some of them, or quite a few of them, they'll have success. Others, the horror stories, they'll miss out a vital step in the process, and there are several steps. Getting MIQ and flights, that's just the start. There's lots and lots of other steps. So the main advantage I can bring to the table is really sound advice about which airlines to use. Some of them have been really flaky through this whole thing. They've come and gone, hot and cold. The other ones that I really don't bother with. I back solid horses for the race and getting you home. I do, unlike most travel agents in the UK and also New Zealand-based travel agents, I've been involved right from the start with MIQ, booking people when I've had the opportunity on their behalf. I've done the registration, done the booking, and then tied it in with the best airfare I can find that fits in with arrival. Now that the peak season has arrived, and it happened last year as well, where it's really, really difficult just because of the supply-demand inequality, it's really challenging. I've been sending out emails just advising how to work through that process, and also just encouraging people that are really discouraged about missing out, just to keep trying, because you've got to be in the game to have a chance. So I'd help out a lot with that. For those people who've been successful, and I've made arrangements for them, if there's something has happened, and it doesn't happen very often, if there's been a rescheduling or in very rare occasions a flight cancellation, I don't tell the person about it. I negotiate with MIQ and the airlines, and I get the people on a flight a day or two either side of their intended departure, and I fix it up, go back to them with a solution, so they're not put in a stressful situation. They just have it solved. So that's kind of what I do, and I really enjoy that, that side of things. As part of my confirmation with the air tickets, seating, meals, all that kind of thing, which is done as a matter of course, I also send out quite a long checklist of what must be done before departure back to New Zealand in the way of pre-testing, visas, all that kind of stuff. There's quite a long list. And also, if you're intending to return to the UK or elsewhere, what you need to do as far as forms and pre-tests and all of that stuff. All of those are really, really vital steps, which if you miss, there'll be tears at the airport, and that doesn't help anyone. So that's probably the major advantage, is that if I'm able to handle your arrangements, is that all the potential stresses are taken away, that it just disappears. So MIQ, blimey, we could talk for weeks about this. I won't get into the pros and cons of the system that we have, but as I said before, I've been involved since August last year, when it originally came about. I know the system really well, have great contacts in MIQ. I've got several emails that I can, if I have a challenge, I can email them. They're very responsive, and I've worked a really good rapport with the MIQ people. So if the wheels get knocked off somehow, I'm able to put things straight pretty quickly. The new virtual waiting room system, there's a new release next Tuesday starting at 5 AM UK time, 6 PM New Zealand time, or log in at 5 PM New Zealand time. That new system has taken a bit of getting the head around, but I think from my point of view, it is much more equitable and fair. So generally, somewhere between 10 and 12% of people who applied last week got a space, and we're pretty happy with it. A strong word of advice: do not choose a Sunday to arrive in New Zealand. There are very, very few options to arrive on Sunday, and certainly nothing affordable. It'll cost you a fortune. So if you're lucky enough to get selected with your registration, pick any day that's not a Sunday for arrival into New Zealand. The other thing is, if you're considering, if you think that 2 weeks in a hotel room on your own is going to be boring and cost you a lot, and you'll get lonely, for goodness sake, right from the outset, register yourself in MIQ with someone to travel with, whether that's a partner or a good friend. Do it right from the outset. It'll be much easier than trying to do it afterwards. It'll cost you less. You'll be able to, you won't get too lonely. There'll be someone to chat to. Most importantly, you'll have someone to pillow fight with, and that's a great stress reliever. So that'd be my strong advice. So the process, what I'd recommend, if you haven't done already, most of you that are listening will have, is register yourself on the MIQ site, you and a friend if someone's coming with you. email me. My email is Jeremy, Jeremy, @wtmot.co.nz. If you're successful enough to get yourself a space, what I then do is look at your date and work out what the best airfare option is for you, make up a very comprehensive proposal with the price, baggage allowance, all the terms and conditions, and most importantly, the booking reference and the arrival flight number. Those two things you are given 48 hours after you've booked an MIQ space to go back into the site, put into your registration, and that magically turns into the all-important MIQ voucher, which you need to show the airline when you come out to New Zealand. So I send all of those things, and if you decide to take up my proposal, then you simply go back into the MIQ space, plug in those two things, you send a voucher. The relief, the stress relief is immense for everyone. It's amazing. So that's what I recommend you do. Then after that, and only after that time, you come back to me and we work out details of how you pay. So it can be to our bank account with a credit card, get your parents to call with the credit card details. There are quite a few different ways. I then, within 24, 48 hours, send you a comprehensive itinerary with all the seating, meals, etc., and that checklist so that you don't fall through the gaps. I'm all about stressless, so that's what we do. Thanks again, and thanks for listening. Thanks for your support, Kiwis in London crew, and everyone. Thanks, Clint, for this platform. I've received some amazing messages, phone calls, gifts, visits in the office from people who've come back, and yeah, it's been very gratifying. That's for me, that's most of the reward for doing this is you know, relieving the stress. It's a stressful time. So on that note, I'm going to have a breakfast beer, and you guys better have one too. Back to Clint.
Yes, Jeremy, and I like to say that on the Kiwis in London community, Jeremy's been working some pretty long hours to try and help us out, and it's been really, really, it's been amazing. He's getting a lot of love. There's definitely a lot of love, so you deserve that beer, mate. Rightio, so we're going to be starting to answer some questions now. I've got a question for Jamila. Hey, get ready for this one. Jamila, we're asking a question. Are wages similar in the UK versus New Zealand, or does it depend on the sector?
I think you've answered your question there directly. A really great one. I think it is in some industries, roles and sectors, it's comparative. In others, it's really not. I think if you are someone who maybe has been overseas, maybe 10 plus years more senior in your career, there probably is a disparity there. But for someone who's probably got maybe 3 or 5 years experience, it can be like for like. But it is, unfortunately, yeah, industry or sector dependent. But that's something that we're able to help with in like initial conversations and things. But yeah, hope that helps.
Thank you. Bridget, question for you, mate. What's the rental market like for families, and what is the biggest challenge?
The rental market for families is the same as the rental market for everybody, pretty tough. Yeah, I mean, it's all about how you present yourself. Not so much the challenge, it's just that it's very competitive. So how you present yourself, you want to be turning up for viewings when you get to New Zealand, building a relationship with the agent. It's making yourself stand out, sending a little note with your application saying why this is the perfect house for you, your tenancy record, references you've got from the UK. Build yourself up to be the ideal tenant. Really, you have to work quite hard at doing that.
Another one for you. Is it easy to get a place within New Zealand primary schools?
Yes, because as soon as you live in the zone for that primary school, you have automatic entry to that primary school. So the key really is to, and I emphasised this in my presentation earlier, get to New Zealand, figure out your short list of neighbourhoods that you want to live in, check out the schools in those neighbourhoods, secure the rental property, and then you have automatic access to that public primary school that is in the zone for the area where you're living.
And don't run away just yet. One more question. About shipping, actually. Generally, is it still more cost effective to ship good quality household furniture and small appliances than to purchase in New Zealand, even with the increased shipping costs? Or has the balance shifted?
It's going to depend from person to person what you've got to bring. You know, if you're bringing something really expensive that you can only get in the UK, then probably yes. But, you know, shipping prices have increased by over 100% in some cases. We have often worked with our clients and give them contacts for stores in New Zealand where they can price equivalent items from the UK, so they can actually get it and do some real calculations around that question. I think in the past, the answer to that has been a clear yes. Often it is cheaper to buy things or to bring things with you rather than buy them in New Zealand, taking into account the cost of shipping. But that equation has changed quite a lot over the course of the pandemic. So I think you need to do some work on it to evaluate it.
Yes, thanks so much for that. Geraldine, I have a couple of questions for you, mate. Does Halo also transfer other currencies like the US?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, most currencies worldwide we can transfer. There are some exotic currencies that are a little more difficult, but generally, probably for the purposes of the fellow Kiwis here today, yeah, most currencies globally we can transfer from anywhere to anywhere. So yeah.
And also, if I'm not a Kiwi, can I open a bank account before leaving?
Yes, you can actually. So the banks have set up what they call a migrant and expat team. So whether you're a new migrant coming to New Zealand from the UK or from wherever, or a Kiwi returning home, in both ways, you can get your bank account set up before you leave.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And thank you to everyone for asking questions. And what we're going to do is we do have a recording of this and a follow-up email we'll send with everyone with your contact details. And if you have any more questions, you can contact us after that as well. So on that note, I believe everyone's ready now to say goodbye. I'd like to thank all those panelists, indeed those ones especially who woke up very early in New Zealand to be here with us. Thank you so much. And to everyone else in London as well. I'd like to thank you all for coming along, the participants as well. Have a really good night, and we'll be in touch by email very soon.
Bye, everyone.
Cheers.